And welcome, welcome. We'll start, of course, with our bracha. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kitshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah.
Amen.
Amen.
And we are in the midst of Tazri'ah09, which at times is actually a 2-week involvement, but this time is only for 1 week. So we are looking at something that, of course, is considered one of the most arcane subjects in Judaism. And, my experience has taught me that before I judge negatively and harshly these kinds of subjects, to keep in mind that sometimes the most sublime and beautiful ideas can come out of these sorts of things. It can happen. And to just try and engage and try to gain an understanding. And I can tell you, of course, that there's so much about this that I struggle with myself, and I feel privileged to be able to share this with all of you, and hope that it is shedding some light on this particular subject. Again, the background note is that I realized for the first time in my life that all these issues of Tuma and Tahara have to do with preparing ourselves for immortality. And that may also be the connection that we have with Egypt, because as you know, in Egypt, they were quite concerned about that. But I want to actually read from a prayer that said at the beginning of the service, if I can find it. See, it's right at the very beginning. It's said, here it is. This is said actually before one enters the synagogue and before the formal worship begins. And it's a very early prayer that one says, and it's Elohai Neshama Shinatata Bi, and I'll simply read the English for you. The soul that you, my God, have given me is pure. There's that word, Tohorah. So there's a connection already there. You created it. You formed it. You breathed it into me. You keep my body and soul together. So that's Va'atam Mishamra B'Qb, which just simply means I think it's referring actually to the soul, right? The Neshama, and that you keep it within me. So the English is a little bit different. The translation is perhaps a little more interpretive than it perhaps needs to be. And then it goes on to say, one day you will take my soul from me to restore it to me in life. Is this idea of immortality, right? And here we go. So long as the soul is within me, I acknowledge you, Adonai, my God, my ancestors' God, master of all creation, sovereign of all souls. Praised are you, Adonai. And the translation I'll give to you first, but then that is to say the English that I have here I'll give you, but I'll then look at the Hebrew, which I think is a little bit different. Praised are you, Adonai, who restores the soul to the lifeless, exhausted body. And that is an interpretation of the Hebrew, because the Hebrew says, Baruch atah Hashem, blessed are you, O Lord, HaMachazir Nishamot, who returns the Nishama. And by the way, the word Nishama, Linshom, means to breathe. So it's that the fact that we're animated in that sense, but also in the spiritual sense, because you don't actually see breath unless the temperature is low enough. But anyway, the important point is Lifkarim Meitim. So a pegar is a corpse. So literally, and not euphemistically, it's saying we return the neshama to dead corpses. That's what it says. And that can be understood, of course, in two senses. And that is seeing the act of awakening as being, in a sense, resurrection. That it is a tiny little fraction of ultimate resurrection. So all this stuff here, this Tuma and Tara, has to do with preparing ourselves both spiritually and physically. And of course, Tzara'at is a very major form, an indication of impurity. And in fact, there is a place, I believe in Numbers, where Miriam becomes leprous, where Aaron says that she is dead, and uses that term. So I think there's plenty of suggestive, if not compelling, evidence that we're onto something here. So, and this is why it's such an object of fascination and study within our tradition. So let's get into the text itself. So here we are. V'ra'ah hakohen et habasar hachai. So this is in a case, I believe we're still talking about a situation where he sees a situation where it's possible that the person is entirely covered. I'd have to go back for sure. With leprosy, in which case he's considered pure, ironically and interestingly. No explanations there, but here he sees some raw flesh once again, right? And he declares him impure because he sees raw flesh. Chai leads live, but it means raw in this context. Habasar hachai tamehu tzara'at. The indication of raw flesh is that he is impure. Tzara'at. This is an indication of it being leprosy. And here's the Rashi, Tzara'at, and he says habasar hahu. This is referring to that particular flesh, meat, whatever. Basar, and what Rashi is going to give us, this little part, basar lashon zachar. He says that the noun basar, the flesh, is in fact masculine, and he's explaining it because tzara'at is a feminine word, and it should have said tzara'at he, but because it's referring to the basar, this is why it's who. So he's saying that this who is actually referring to this basar. Okay. In other words, this who, that is the basar, is tzara'at, is leprous. Onwards. Or ki yashuv habasar hachai v'nehapach lelavan. Suppose the flesh once again it turns back, right? This raw flesh turns back and once again becomes white, right? So now this raw flesh has become white. Uva, and this person comes, I believe, or El HaKohen. He has to come to the Kohen. And V'ra'ahu HaKohen, and the Kohen looks at him, he sees him, V'hinei ne'apach ha'nega lavan, and behold, the nega, the inflammation, the plague, has turned into white, has changed into white. V'tihar HaKohen et ha'nega tahorhu. And at that point, the priest will tihar. It's interesting. It's because in some ways it's like he makes it pure, right? And this, of course, is all consistent with the fact that it's the priest who makes that declaration that gives it its status, right? So the priest declares the inflammation, whatever you want to call it, the sore, pure, tahor, and then it says he is in fact pure. So it's the declaration of the priest that he is pure, and in fact he is pure. And these are all sort of subtle suggestions regarding this interrelationship between the person's physical condition and possibly a mental or spiritual condition. So, lishi, uvasar, and flesh, yebo beoro, when there is within it, in its skin, Shchin v'nirpa. So this is a different kind of infection. This shchin is a boil or inflammation of the skin, right? And it heals. V'nirpa, and it heals. It's healed. The boil, the inflammation, the boil is healed. Rashi is just telling us what shchin is, and he says shchin lashon chimun. it has the connotation of heat, some kind of heat. Shenit chamem habasar belikui, because the flesh has heated up. It heated up in when it was struck. Habalo mechamat maka, which in other words, something smacked the skin. Right. This is some kind of beating on account of beating maka. Shalom mechamat haor. And in this case, it's not on account of being burnt. The skin wasn't burnt, but it was struck. And that striking it warms it up, heats it up, and creates something that is called shchin, a boil, right? A boil. Venirpa, and it is healed. Hashchin ahe'ela arucha. So the boil itself has healed, right? Uvim kumo, and in its place, he'ela nega acher, a different kind of affliction or affection has come up. So it's been replaced with some kind of scab or different looking skin or something, but clearly it's not normal skin. That's what it's saying. So we are looking at the various types of affections or infections that can take place on the person's skin. V'haya b'makom hashkin, and so we're describing what it looks like. And it shall be that in the place of the boil, se'et levana, a white swelling, or baheret levana, or a bright spot, right? A white brightness. Adam demet, or Adam damet, with reddish streaks. So Adom is red, and Adam dom is reddish streaks. V'nir'ah el hakohen, and it is shown to the priest. So again, Rashi trying to give us some way of visualizing what's going on here, and understand that within the tradition, there's a great deal of attempts made and to actually describe what is going on here, because we want to make it a reality. It isn't just a theoretical thing, right? This is actual condition, even though these days, of course, we don't, as far as I'm aware, that within the Jewish tradition, there really is none of this actually going on. But even if we're studying it, perhaps someday it will need to go on. We don't know. But being aware of it and conscious of it has tremendous value. This is the study of Torah. So, or baheret levana adam damet, right? Or a white brightness, right? But white spot, something like that, bright spot with reddish streaks. She'ein hanega lavan chalak. He says this particular affliction is not smooth, white all over, right? Ella looks patuch is what it's looking like, u'me'orav. So, but it is rather variegated, u'me'orav, and combined b'shtei marot lovin v'oded, in two sites, both white and red. So there's both a white and a redness to this particular, what's happened to take the place of this shchin, this boil. We're seeing redness, red and white. It's not just white, but in the case of a swelling, there it is white. Okay, so I am thinking that here it's white. This says it's white with reddish streaks, and it may be talking about two different kinds of indications following the boil, of the healing of the boil. Vera'ah HaKohen, and the Kohen should look at it, he should see it, or the Kohen sees, yeah, David, I see you raised your hand, please.
Yeah, so is it blistering at that point then? I mean, is that what the red and the white represents? Because a boil, eventually blisters, so, or can blister. Mm-hmm. So
I don't know if that, that would perhaps, well, but then would you say the boil had healed? right? That's the only thing. And this is,
Yeah.
you're helping me show specifically my lack of knowledge in this, or lack of expertise in this particular subject. So yeah, these are things that would take tremendous study and, to develop a level of expertise to actually be able to do this. But the material is there. It is actually, thank God, it's been preserved, and there's actually I believe there's a tractate. I believe it's probably I would guess in Toharot, in the section of the Mishnah that deals with purity and impurity, and it's called Negaim, and that refers to these kinds of things like Tzara'at, like leprosy, where they go into great detail to try to understand exactly what the tradition is trying to teach us in this regard. So I cannot speak with certainty. I can only act as a guide. My daughter and I were talking about this morning. I'm not the sage on the stage. I'm the guide on the side.
Well, you're doing a very good
You
job.
learned
So
that.
thank you.
Yeah, we were talking about, you know, uh, to what degree, the privilege of being a teacher, and the fact that one has to admit the truth in a very sharp kind of way as to, the level of ignorance that we have. But hopefully this is helpful. Regardless, it's helpful. Okay.
Yep.
So I wouldn't say that it's necessarily a blister. It could be. I wouldn't want to say for certain that it isn't. But it seems to me that one of the things about boils is that they are blisters.
Well,
Yeah.
but I wouldn't use the term boil. I would use the term inflammation because
Okay.
boils are not white spots.
Uh-huh.
They never are. They may have, I mean, to be graphic, white pus coming out of them,
Yes.
but
Yeah.
they're pink spots. I
Okay.
I have a skin condition,
Mm.
so I kind of know what I'm speaking about. But the I don't think that the Torah says these are boils. It says there are white spots or, some kind of inflammation perhaps, or discoloration for sure.
Right.
But
So
I wouldn't use the word boils either.
So here's the thing. You notice that where I have Shechin at the top of the page, you notice
Mm-hmm.
right here, right?
Mm-hmm.
Inflammation, stroke, boil. And just in case people don't know what this is a reference, the J stands for the Jastrow Dictionary, and
Mm-hmm.
1547 is the page number where the word Shechin appears, and the B, I learned this actually from Rabbi Ryan Dulkin, and that is because the Jastrow page is divided into two parts, into two columns. So this is the second column on the page to help you find, and locate the word. And he has boil as well as inflammation. His first translation is inflammation, but he also has the word boil. So
So I mean,
um, I
that's
mean, I don't know medically, and again,
what a
there's
boil
it's a
looks like. It's
technical, right, right. By
the
the way,
white in the middle is the
yes, the pus.
discharge.
Yeah, yeah. So here, by the way, just to notice, because I hadn't mentioned it, that is one of the plagues that the Egyptians suffered. It's one of the 10 plagues. Is that
Boils,
yeah, yeah.
but not leprosy.
No,
They don't
no.
call it leprosy,
It's not
and
called
I think
leprosy.
they're
Right.
distinguishing.
Right, correct. Good point. And I'm glad you brought that out. This is not leprosy. By the way, of course, I'm more concerned that we could have is psoriasis, right? But they discuss a whole bunch of things. We're also going to discuss leprosy on the head, right? And on the scalp, etc. We haven't gotten to it, but it'll be discussed. So at any rate, yeah, okay. I think we're on to verse 20. Yes. Okay. Right. Vera'ah HaKohen, and the I think may have been in the middle of this verse, and the Kohen sees the Hine Mar'eh Shafal Minaor, and its appearance, the Mar'eh, its appearance is lower than the skin. And Rashi will explain what that means, because it doesn't say Vehine Shafal Minaor. It is lower than the skin. It says Mar'eha. Its appearance is lower than the skin. Shafal. I mean, by the way, as I'm scrolling, just look at all the Torah Tmima that's involved, so that if if we should live so long, if I should live so long that we can get through the Rashi on the Torah, my thought and my hope would be to perhaps go back then and start looking at the Torah Tamima, which will, of course, add tremendous level of understanding to this whole subject, at any rate, because he reflects the Talmudic and Midrashic explanations. Anyway, Usa'ara, and the hair on the skin, Hafach Lavan, has altered to become white. It has changed from presumably brown or black into white. V'tim or hakohen, and the priest shall declare him impure. Negat Tzara'at. He, notice it's he right here. It is the plague of leprosy, of Tzara'at. And I'm so sorry. I have a choice of either translating it or just staying with the word Tzara'at, because leprosy is, of course, not what we're talking about in English. Bashchin parachat, in the inflammation, okay, it has erupted, right? The poreach, right? We know poreach, to grow, to develop, etc. Right? It's developed in the boil or in the inflammation. Let's go back and take a look at the Rashi.
Yeah, and Chabad uses the word lesion.
Okay, that's good. I like that. I like lesion. Maybe I should put that up there. Chabad is helpful. I have a lot of respect for their level of scholarship. In my humble opinion. What I'm doing is I'm trying to see if I can get this to change. And I guess I can't here, but I'll try and remember it. Mar'eh shafel, right? So we said it's mar'eha, its appearance is lower. The ein mamasha shafel. And so what he's saying is it isn't actually lower. Mamash means the reality of it, right? It isn't in actual fact lower. Ella, however, mitoch levinoto, on account of its white coloration, hu nir'ah shafel, it looks lower, v'amok, and deeper. And he gives an example. Kemar echama, as the sun appears, amukam min hatzel. It looks as if it's actually lower than the shade. That when you look at something that's shaded, the sun looks as if it's lower than the shade. And actually, in my yard, I have I can actually see some stuff that's shaded, and I get the point he's making, because it looks as if the shadow is on top of what is illumined. And of course it isn't, right? But it looks like it could be. So take just a teeny bit more here. Let's go to the next verse. Ve'im yir'ena hakohen, and if the kohen sees it, right, this situation, this inflammation, this lesion, v'hine ein ba se'ar lavan, and indeed there is no white hair in it. Ushvala einena min haor, and it is not lower. And we have to, of course, understand that it means it doesn't appear to be lower than the skin. I'm going to guess, right? Vehi keha, and in fact, it's faded. Vehiskiro hakohen shiva yamim, and the kohen should isolate him for 7 days. By the way, sort of that idea of isolation for 7 days, that's a theme, right? Aaron and his sons were sequestered for 7 days in the Mishkan. This idea of sequestration has clearly greater implications than may appear on the surface, right? So let's go on. We can have a moment to go, but I can stop here. Well, no, let's do one more verse, because I think it finishes the subject in a way. The im paso tifse baor, but if in fact it has spread in the skin, v'timeha kohen oto, the kohen should declare him impure, nega he. It is in fact a nega. It is a plague, right? Lingoa means to touch, right? So it's as if maybe, that this is seen as sort of in a way being divinely touched negatively, in a negative way, right? So, okay, we'll stop here. Oh, let's take a look. Sorry.
Well, there's also, so there's a Rashi, and then there's one more verse with Rashi, but I don't know if you have time that completes the
Oh, really? Okay. All right.
yeah.
Okay. Thank you. So negahi. It is an affliction, not a bad word. Okay. So it says hasait hazot o haberet, referring to this eruption. And sa'et means of going up kind of stuff, right? Or habaheret, or the bright spot. Okay, cool. This is a end of a paragraph. So ve'im tachteha ta'amod habaheret. Okay, but if in fact this bright spot holds up, it doesn't develop, right? It's just there, lo pasata. And again, so it puts it positively and negatively. In fact, that it hasn't spread. In other words, if it remains, it has the same appearance, hasn't changed, right? And it has not spread. Tzarevet hashchin hi. It is considered to be simply a scar left by the boil or the inflammation or the lesion. But tiharoha kohen, so that the priest should declare him pure. So tachtea means in its place, bimkoma, in its place. Tzarevet hashchin. So let's see how he right. He says ketargumo, as the Targum translates it. Here's the word roshem, which means it means a roshem. I'm trying to think of how to translate that. I mean, it's like an indication. Lishom, for example, means to sign something. So, in other words, it's Roshem Shechina. It's an indication that the boil was there, and that's why translating it as a scar is just wonderful. It's I think, a perfect translation, right? Roshem Shechina, the scar of the Shechin. Eino ela Roshem. It is simply a mark, right? Hachimum, of the place which was heated up, right? Hanikar bebasar, which is recognizable in the flesh. Kol tzarevet, right? So he says, anytime you get this word tzarevet, right up here, right? Lashon rigia or hanirga. So it's saying somehow that the flesh is easing in a way. I think margoa means to rest or to be at ease. Hanirga mechamat chimun. So Lauren, I'm sorry because I did not translate this. I did not. I for some reason I did not put in a translation. So if you
It says shriveled
there we go.
or
So
contracted
yeah. So well,
of the heat.
right. So nitzarev is to shrivel. So what was the other word you said? You said
Contracted.
there was another word as well. What was it?
Contracted
Okay, that was the only one. Okay.
because
Okay.
of the heat. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Lauren. So it is contracted on account of the heat. Kamor, and he gives an example in Ezekiel 21, then nitzrevu ba kol panim, and all the faces are shriveled, right? This is the French word, reit, and it sounds like something like retract, somewhere like that.
Or retire.
Yeah, something like that. And then it says zusammenziehen. So that's beautiful. Zusammen means all together. In other words, it's pulled together. And ziehen, I think, means a sign, something like that, right? So it looks shriveled. And there's here, einschrumpfen. Einschrumpfen. Again, these are the Yiddish words for shriveled or contracted. And he goes in Tzarevet one more time at it here. Tzarevet, let's take a look. So he gives again it's a
Retrimont.
yeah, retrimont.
And before it was retrir.
Yeah, and says this would be norba, a word that I totally don't recognize in Yiddish. Okay, but again, it's all that same idea. Right.
So he was using the infinitive before and now the
Uh-huh.
gerund form, but
Right. Yes. Yes. Okay. So we'll start.
I just wanted to point out on 22, I don't think you read the Rashi, but it's just about that they use a feminine
Yes,
he.
I mentioned it.
Okay,
Sorry.
okay.
No. I mentioned the masculine, so maybe I didn't. Let me look and see. I know I
But
did.
it's, yeah, it just says it refers to the feminine he because the word
Yes, right.
referring
I did
to.
not. You're right. I did not. You're right. 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 Haseit hazot. Right. Because the word haseit and baheret are both feminine words. Right. He's just pointing out the jumping around. Okay. So we will start here.
So we're on the second aliyah now.
Yes. Of a double when it's doubled. Yes, the second aliyah this year.
Or revi'i when when it's not.
Well, all right. So I'm happy to keep it recording until it's until we don't have any more comments. Okay, we'll stop.